Hello, it's Employee a Million, and welcome to 2024's Q&A. Thank you so much for all the questions that you asked me last month. I hope to answer basically all the first questions you gave me for the ones that asked multiple. And I got nearly 40, so let's get into it. Let's make this as speedy as I can while still answering your questions thoroughly. First one, I got a question shared by three people: Alkison Super, I don't know, and Zoro Buenoda. Sorry if that's a hard name for me to pronounce. They all asked about when I'm going to be talking about season 13 of SpongeBob, and the reason I've put SpongeBob off on this channel for a little while is that it's just not as fun to talk about as it was like 5-10 years ago. Like, not just because of all the controversy surrounding the spin-offs, but just because it just isn't the same as it was in season 9B, 10, 11. The conversation isn't really, is the show getting better? It's more, is the show still alive, or is it just pumping out the same stuff over and over? But I've seen a few things from season 13, and I've really been meaning to go back to SpongeBuddy Mania and review the third movie and season 13 in order. I have no more plans on covering the spin-offs, unfortunately, just season 13, and even that's on the maybe pile. But I have seen a few episodes, they're fine. I rewatched the third movie recently. I don't think it's good, but it's a little more nuanced, and I just don't think it's a good movie. So thank you for the question, but yeah, it's always going to be in the maybe pile for me from now on. But I do hope to review it by the end of this year and do that ranking video. Andre Cito Sponge Lola asks, what do you think about that rumor that Nickelodeon cancelled every Nicktoon because it's not as good as SpongeBob, as well as that people blame Spongy for everything bad at Nick? I personally think neither of both are true. I feel like there is some truth to the first one. Not that they don't consider any show as good as SpongeBob anymore, but just because they can't get the ratings anymore. And you're constantly in an uphill battle whenever you pitch a show to Nickelodeon and they approve it and put funding into a first season, put a little promotion into it, air it. The ratings are going to be low because cable ratings are just getting lower by the day. And it's just not going to win over as many people as SpongeBob. Nicktoons for the past 18 or so years have been in that continuous loop of that situation just getting harder and harder to overcome. But I don't think that all the Nicktoons since then have been bad. I think it's just that they can't pick up an audience anymore, which is really sad. And people kind of blame SpongeBob for that sort of practice of just focusing on one show and running it into the ground. But I say in my Rugrats review that I kind of blame Rugrats for that too. Nick has been doing this since before SpongeBob aired. You can't really blame SpongeBob if it's just almost a systemic problem within the studio or the company. But yeah, I feel like there is a half-truth to that, but that is just saying that they cancel everything because it isn't as good as SpongeBob and that they just run SpongeBob into the ground. There's a half-truth to that, but you are oversimplifying it, if that makes any sense. I got a similar question from Jaden Julia and TAW Productions 2.0 about whether I'll review Golden Age or classic stuff like Disney, Looney Tunes, Tom and Jerry, Popeye, UPA, Hanna-Barbera, that sort of classic stuff. And I would love to. That would be the dream of being able to win over an older animation fan demographic. But I've got to find the right format. I was thinking of the idea of reviewing all 1,000 Looney Tunes from worst to best, but that would probably break my brain. So I've got that idea, and also one of just looking over the early years of Mickey Mouse next year, because next year, we talked a lot about this year of the first few Mickey Mouse cartoons entering public domain because they're just that old now. But next year, the last few to be animated by Iwerks are coming to the public domain. So that gives me a good idea for a video where I just talk about, the first few years of Mickey Mouse and how the character developed, being able to use full clips without any threat of a copyright or takedown, which YouTube has been extremely lenient on me for some reason for all of this channel's existence. But I do want to play it safe whenever I get to them. Just make something that people will want to see and that I'll want to make and that YouTube will not be unhappy with. Pepe Le Pew, the man himself, asks, I know this seems like a very strange question, but how do you feel about classic cartoon characters that you love being cancelled? I know exactly what this guy's talking about himself, but also cases like Apu and Johnny Bravo, where characters that were considered like not so offensive at the time may be considered more offensive today because of the jokes that they tell or the background surrounding them or just how they represented a different time. And Pepe Le Pew has been a very big culprit of that, and I think it's unfair to just look at the most offensive thing about a character, magnify that, and pretend that that's the only thing the character ever was, because there's more to these characters than people remember, and having a company announce that they'll no longer be using them is just admitting that you don't have a creative solution or creative workaround. And it is really sad that that is just common practice now. Like, I heard even, like, they haven't cancelled Sokka in the new live-action Avatar, but they have toned down one of his big character flaws, and people are already predicting that that's a big no-no, because then you'll have nothing to learn from that character, and people will have nothing to learn from the characters that have been, you know, just sort of tossed out because they can't work anymore. Well, guess what? You can have a creative workaround. You can think of ways to use the character. You can use Pepe Le Pew or Johnny Bravo and not have sex be the only thing they think about. It is going to be hard, but you can still make these characters work if they are timeless, if they were around for that long. I think especially with the Sokka thing, people are getting really sick of companies just not wanting to have risky characters anymore. And that just, it's not going to teach people anything. Cinnamon Ben 64 asks, who is your favorite and least favorite characters voiced by Tom Kenny? I really like it when Tom Kenny plays like a geek or a nerd or a sidekick. SpongeBob obviously is a big geek, but he also is really good at playing sidekicks like Ed and Brandy and Mr. Whiskers, Slinkman and Camp Lazlo, Commander Peepers and Wander Over Yonder. I really like when he gets to play that archetype because that just feels like what he's like in real life, even though we know basically nothing about him outside of interviews. He's just got that aura to him. As for least favorite characters, it is pretty difficult to pick characters that aren't one-offs, so I settled on Sharper Image here from 8 Crazy Nights. Bryce Fawn asks, what are your thoughts on the upcoming Ren and Stimpy reboot for Paramount Plus, which was previously going to be on Comedy Central? I'm not too excited about it. Ren and Stimpy is a hard show to replicate, and in some ways, especially behind the scene ways, there's things about it you probably shouldn't replicate, but as long as the people making it are making it because they want to make something entertaining, not just because they want to just be tasteless with these characters, who am I to say? Ryan's Treasures asks, what is your ranking for the first 5 Disney animated features? I know Pinocchio is your favorite film of all time, so I'm interested to know your thoughts on Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Fantasia, Dumbo, and Bambi. Fantasia would definitely be my second favorite. Not every segment is going to appeal to everyone, but I just love the gusto of that movie, that they really went for this big artsy festival of animation, and it is really fun to listen to as well as watch. Middle of the list would be Bambi because it is just a really cute and beautiful movie. Snow White would be fourth because it's got a good score and stuff, but it is pretty slow paced compared to even like the 1940s movies. Dumbo would go at the bottom because it's a childhood favorite movie of mine, but it is a bit too short to leave as big an impact as the others. And I think people knew that at the time, which is why it took so long to be inducted into the National Film Registry and all that. But it's not a bad movie for the most part. Mr. Gigu asks, you watched the newest seasons of Futurama on Hulu, and what's your opinions and feelings about this new era of the show? Oh my gosh. I had quite a bit of hope for this. I thought that it would be good. I thought they would understand the mistakes they made in the Comedy Central run and alleviate them. They double down on them. I think that so far this is probably worse than the Comedy Central run, and that's saying something because they had some pretty messy episodes there. I thought it started off fine with the streaming episode and us learning more about Amy and Kif's babies, and there were a few where I was like, okay, that was quite entertaining, like even the Christmas episode. But then by the time that you get to the vaccination episode, it just falls off a cliff. Like, they were trying too hard to be current, even though they're set 1,000 years later than us. The finale to that first clunk of episodes does feel like this classic David X. Cohen high concept idea for Futurama, but it just doesn't have a lot of energy to it. It's just, here's a high concept thing, let's talk about it for 22 minutes. That's the episode. But I hope that the second half of this new season is a bit better, because my goodness, it needs a pickup. It really needs a pickup. Futurama was an excellent show back in the Fox days, and I do really want people to remember it fondly. Historia est magistravitae. Can you watch and critique next year, as far as Disney 2010 cartoon series go, actually, The Legend of the Three Caballeros? I didn't put it on the 2010s Disney poll. I think I didn't, but I did hear excellent things. It looks amazing for one of those major Disney character shows. I really like the art style from the clips I've seen. I do really wish they'd experiment more with these characters, and the Three Caballeros are a very underrated group of characters in the Disney animated canon, and I think that I might actually like this show whenever I get around to watching it. Jonah Oppenheim asks, will you review The Strange Chores? The cartoon itself is only 26 episodes long, so it might be easy to watch through. It seems fine, probably quality since it was made by the Bluey guys, but I may need to know more about it before I commit to a review. A lot of people have asked me, like, will you review this, will you review that? The answer is eventually, but I will say this looks fine to most of them. Like, GlowNime even asks, are you going to cover Freakazoid to finish the Steven Spielberg produced cartoons? That is in the cards. I know Paul Rudd is a great help to Animaniacs and Pinky and the Brain, and this was basically his baby, but you're gonna get some Paul Rudd this year, trust me. Cowboy Doggy, will you ever watch and review the Beetlejuice cartoon that aired in the 90s? Like all my show requests, the answer is a maybe. It looks alright from whatever I've seen. The intro is amazing, rest just kinda looks fine. I haven't even seen the 80s one. Super Seal asks, have you ever seen this Adventure Camp? No, but it has an interesting title. Charles M, do you ever plan on doing Rocket Power or Are Real Monsters? I think the reason they're asking that is that after Cat Dog, those are the last like major 90s Nicktoons I've got left to cover, aside from Kablam and Oh Yeah Cartoons, which are showcase shows. I've only ever seen 1 or 2 Are Real Monsters episodes, and Rocket Power I saw the first half hour a couple years ago. I think both are in the category for me at the moment. They might surprise me whenever I get around to them, which should be within the next few years. I have always thought of doing Are Real Monsters as like an October show, so you might have that to look forward to this year. Hafiq Huda asks, will you ever give the 2003 Teen Titans series another chance? Teen Titans Go is a different beast altogether, just thought I'd let you know. I've known for like 10 years. And I have seen one more episode of Teen Titans that isn't the virus episode that no one really likes even. And that is How Long Is Forever, which is the one where Starfire travels 20 years into the future and everyone's kind of lost without her. I watched it because that date eventually came a couple weeks ago, and it sold me on the show. It looks way better now. I think that just watching that virus episode for that Fantastic Voyage video, it just kind of shows how one very cliched episode can drag down a whole show based on first impressions, but I don't like to be that guy. I have heard amazing things about the 2003 Teen Titans series, and it's probably a lot better than I ever thought it would be. Question 1 from Shamex is, can you look at Villainous by Ellen Iturrell? Another eventually, but question 3 is, your Invader Zim review is very helpful, and I just added thank you. Mute Princess, have you thought of reviewing more shows that aren't Cartoon Network originals but aired on Cartoon Network USA, like Totally Spies, Johnny Test, Two Stupid Dogs, which in some ways is the prototype for the cartoons, and Sailor Moon? I know you've already reviewed / are reviewing Total Drama and Pokemon. Judging by the fact that I did Animaniacs and barely mentioned Cartoon Network in it. I think I'll just wander into more Cartoon Network shows by accident because they aired a lot back in the day. But there are so many shows that I've covered that you'd not really associate with Cartoon Network, but are part of people's Cartoon Network memories, and that just kind of shows the broad power of the channel and the reach that it's had. TM Fuentes, have you seen The Life and Times of Juniper Lee? And they basically go on a, comparison of how it's similar to American Dragon Jake Long. I have not seen a single episode, but I've heard that it's decent. I've heard that there is a bit of a debate over whether it's better than American Dragon. A lot of people prefer American Dragon, but Juniper Lee has its defenders. And the ironic thing is, I got inspired to add American Dragon to my schedule because of how many similarities it had with Turning Red, so that might be interesting. Compare Juniper Lee to Turning Red if I have enough similarities to point out. Probably not a lot, but you never know. Comic Book Guy asks, what's your favorite and least favorite DreamWorks movie? My personal favorite would probably be Shrek. I know that Shrek 2 is an objectively better movie in a lot of different ways, but I just prefer putting Shrek on. It's just how I was raised, I guess. But there were a lot of other candidates that I thought of, like The Road to El Dorado is, I think, extremely underrated. But I haven't kept up too much with DreamWorks movies up after Madagascar 2, but they're not as bad as people say, at least in the 2000s. My least favorite DreamWorks movie, that was hard to pick because I have seen some of the more less liked ones like Shark Tale and Monsters vs. Aliens, but the one that I just had no positive feelings on was the direct-to-video Joseph movie that they made as a prequel to The Prince of Egypt. And it's just because it was put on for us as part of our religious studies classes, and it did just feel like a religious studies video rather than The Prince of Egypt, which was a genuinely amazing movie also. But yeah, it kind of feels like DreamWorks has always been topsy-turvy, but I like more of their output than I don't, at least from the early years. Midi and Regina, what are your favorite animated movies of 2023? I don't really keep up with that many of the current movies. I did a whole vlog of the Super Mario Brothers movie. I thought it was a good movie, but throughout it, I was basically saying, yeah, I can understand why a non-Mario fan may not like this movie. The only other animated movie I saw in theaters this year was Across the Spider-Verse, I think is the name of the second part, and I loved Into the Spider-Verse, and I also loved Across the Spider-Verse. It is definitely a movie that you kind of have to keep up with the pace of, but it is worth it to do that. We got a few memes out of it, which is good. We heard a lot about how the working conditions were quite tough on the animators, and I'm not cool with the directors downplaying that in interviews, so I just hope that the animators are proud of their work, because I would be, and I hope that they're more relaxed now. Pizzaroli asks, what animated movies and films do you want to see in 2024? I've only got two answers. Inside Out 2. I haven't been keeping up with Pixar much, but I loved Inside Out when it came out. I've watched it a few times. It's not one of my very, very favorite Pixar movies, but I do dearly appreciate what it says about emotions and memories and the human psyche through this extreme, exaggerated worldview of the human mind. So Inside Out 2 looks like it is gonna be pretty fun. The other movie that I'm looking forward to this year is The Day the Earth Blew Up, or something to that effect. It's going to be the first fully 2D animated Looney Tunes movie in theaters ever, so I've got to go see it, right? I've got to prove that Warner Brothers should respect animation more, because they should, because they've got an amazing legacy that they aren't really taking full advantage of at the moment. Of their shutting down of Cartoon Network Studios is anything to go by. I am very excited for that movie. It's rare to see a fully 2D animated movie in theaters anyway, so that should be fun. New Master asks, have you seen any Studio Ghibli films? If you haven't, trust me, they're essential animation. I know what you mean. I hadn't watched a Studio Ghibli movie before I got this comment, but after it I watched Spirited Away, and It is a 10 out of 10 movie, one of the very best animated movies ever, and I'm kind of scared of watching more now because I don't know how that can be topped. I might say more about Spirited Away some other time, but just to let you know, I have seen more anime than just the Pokemon anime. Sparkling with Nice asks, EAM, have you ever thought about doing reviews and retrospectives of classic anime series non-Pokemon? Cory in the House is a good one. Yeah, there was that big meme about 10 years ago that people were calling Cory in the House a great anime. And the thing is, I remember watching Cory in the House on Disney Channel way back in like 2007 and only laughing like once an episode. It just felt like a spin-off for the sake of a spin-off. But yeah, just seriously, about anime, I've got to find the right anime for me, which may be hard because as an outsider looking in, there is that stereotype that it is all about either action heroes or anime schoolgirls that I don't really feel like is a fair... It just feels like an overgeneralization of what anime for the past 20 years has been. If you have a show that breaks that stigma, I would love to hear what it is because there is probably more to it than that. Publica thinks that I'm going to be reviewing Evangelion. I'm not. But so the main question, will you review the Pokemon miniseries like Generation? I had thought about doing Pokemon Origins a little while ago because that is sort of an alternate take on the first gen games, Pokemon Red and Blue, which the first season of the anime already was, so it would be fun to like compare and contrast it, but I have heard that people have very negative feelings on that anime. I only watched the first 2 episodes around the time they came out. Thought they were pretty decent, but still preferred going back to season 1 of the long-running Pokemon anime. So I have thought about it, just letting you know that. Brendan Barney asks, if there was an episode of a show you hated that you want to go back and change, what changes would you make and why? That's a very, pompous thing for me to answer because I'm not really that amazing of a fiction writer myself, I think. But if I had to fix an episode by going back to it and touching it up, I think a lot of the worst Tough Puppy episodes would be so easy to fix. Just making the characters a teeny bit smarter, not pointing out the plot too much. I think the worst Tough Puppy episode, Quacky Birthday, you could remove 1 or 2 lines of dialogue and it would be a bit more tolerable in my view, because those later Billionfold shows just had a very nasty habit of being self-conscious but not self-aware, and that just kind of rubs off on the audience in a way. Mertz asks, what are your thoughts on digitally animated Canadian cartoons? Well, Canadian animation for the past 20 years, ever since Flash became mainstream, has had that stigma of it being very cheap and easy to produce, and they just make a lot of it because the government gives them enough money to. Johnny Test, its later seasons are like the poster child for that stereotype of Canadian animation. But there are some shows that look functional, at least, like Total Drama, that works, that looks good. It has a good flow to it. The character designs are detailed, but detailed in a way that they take advantage of Flash to move in good ways. Because I think the criminal flaw for some animated Canadian shows, like Almost Naked Animals, is that they look too detailed to move convincingly. They look alright in stock photos, but not when they move, which I think kills a lot of interest in Canadian animation for a lot of people. But I try to be fair, give it benefit of the doubt, and if more Canadian cartoons come up, I'll probably point out what works and what doesn't for me, and there we go. Anthony Blalock asks, do you have any favorite animation reviewers? A couple years ago, I would have answered that question without a second thought, but now I don't want to play favorites because I'm getting collabs with some of them, so it's kind of like asking about your best friends, really. It isn't really, my place to say, oh, who's your favorite one of these people, because the more people that I have connections to, the harder that is to ask. Glenn Glam asks, you didn't say much about it in your review, so what are your thoughts on Billy and Mandy's Big Boogie Adventure? I think it's a good, fun adventure. in the Billy and Mandy universe. It's mostly through the underworld, if I remember correctly, and it's fun, it's well animated, it's got good jokes in it, Fred Willard is a delight, and I think it's a good Billy and Mandy movie, which Under Fist is its own thing, but the Big Boogie Adventure, from what I remember, is just a funner time if you're a big fan of the show, which is always a good thing for those big TV movies. And I just love that number 3 is the Grim Reaper for some reason. I think that's the best joke of the movie to me. Random Lad asks, how about some shows you've come to like or dislike more after the retrospective? A lot of them I like more after the retrospective for a lot of reasons. The big one being that I feel like I've gotten all my most negative feelings about a show out of my system after I've reviewed it, so I can always just know what I like most about a show and go back to its best episodes or ones that show off its best attributes. I do feel like sometimes with reviewing a show that has some good episodes but is extremely flawed, like Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends or Tough Puppy, that doing the review is like a cleansing process for me, in that I'm just getting that out of my system, showing what I don't like about the show. But after that, I'll know exactly what I like about the show and try to hold on to that. A guy asks, what's your favorite video game series, if any? I'm gonna be a pretty basic boy and say Super Mario. I have played the first 2 Banjo-Kazooie games since last year, but they're on a Japanese Nintendo 64, so the first game I would have a lot more respect for its dialogue, but I can't because Grunty's Furnace Fun is still in Japanese, and that if you thought it was hard before, I just can't get past it because it's all in Japanese. I can't even write down what her sister says because it's all in Japanese. I could use Google Translate, but what fun is there in that? I guess the joke is on me. It's a really funny series, and if it went on for longer, I think it would rival Super Mario in my mind, but Super Mario just has so many games with such good gameplay and art, and that's always going to be my answer, I think. Everything is Awesome asks, what is your favorite game and Robot Master from the MegaMan franchise? Boy, I haven't played Mega Man in a long time. My most common way of playing it was on the Wii U Virtual Console. I got the first 5 games gradually, and I have fond memories of playing them, even if I don't think I completed any of the games. I at least beat all of the Robot Masters at least once, but would always get bored about halfway through the Wily's Fortress in each one. Yeah, I'm gonna have like the basic opinion and say Mega Man 2 is the best. I have a lot of respect for Mega Man 1 for feeling a little more arcadey, and for Mega Man 3 for all the risks it took that have given the game its own personality. But Mega Man 4 and 5 just feel like more of the same. Not bad games, but just more of the same from 3 without that extra oomph. My favorite Robot Master would have to be Quickman, because I like his theme, I like his stage, I like his battle, I like the power-up you get from him. It's all just, I like it. I would probably be more opinionated on which Robot Masters are the best if I had played the games in recent times, but I haven't really played a Mega Man game in like 9 years, so I just gotta rely on nostalgia a little bit. Oh boy, sorry you had to hear all that, SnakeMan. SnakeMan asks, you have complete season DVDs and video game consoles? I've got plenty of video game consoles. I've got an NES, a Game Boy Pocket, a Japanese Nintendo 64, a GameCube, a DS Lite, a DSi, Wii, Wii U, Nintendo Switch, and a PS2 as my DVD player. It is kind of embarrassing that the Super Nintendo is the only major Nintendo console I don't have, because it is considered one of the very best, so whenever I get a Super Nintendo, I am going to personally apologize to it for getting it late. As for complete season box sets, I've got the old Simpsons DVD box sets, I've got the old SpongeBob DVD box sets, I've got a few of the complete series of Nickelodeon shows, but for the most part, I try to stick to streaming services to watch my stuff, which is hard because not a lot of content is available in New Zealand just due to the monopoly TVNZ has on streaming down here, but that's why VPNs are important. And I do really want to stream stuff instead of pirate it, because on one hand, you're not giving money to the companies, but on the other, you're not giving your money to the artists who actually made the show. In the rare chance they do get paid for streaming residuals. Rebel Friend asks, are there any live action shows you like? Yeah. I think in terms of comedy, my answer for the meantime would be It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Someone introduced me to it, like after the Super Mario Brothers movie, just to say, Charlotte Day is actually funny. And I've watched through the first 3 seasons at the moment, and like the first season is second season is alright, third season is really good, and I hear that it's just gonna keep getting better until like season 6. It's not for the faint of heart. They do kind of push good taste, but it is definitely like, it feels like an American sitcom turned up to 11. And in terms of like drama shows, I could talk about Doctor Who for hours. I'm more of a Doctor Who kid than I could ever be a Star Wars or Star Trek kid. I love every era of the show to some degree, even the ones that aren't so popular. There's probably something silly and stupid about it for me to love. It's just a fun show to put on and just have a good time. Even if it's just not a good episode, you can kind of laugh at the cheesy acting and effects. And I love shows like that are old and weird and silly, but also shows that you can always see they're trying their best. And Doctor Who has had a lot of hands throughout the decades, and each time a new producer or a new lead actor comes, it's always a mystery over whether it'll be fun or not, and it always is fun. Angry Jack asks, you have comics, Million? I do remember collecting comics when I was really young. I remember collecting a lot of Simpsons comics, and especially those little omnibuses where they collect 4 comics in total, which is like, I don't know, like 120 pages in total. They are omnibuses. But I remember liking the Simpsons comics as a kid. I stopped paying attention to them around 2010, lost most of them, but a year or 2 ago I got the original Bart Simpson comic at Armageddon, at one of those comic booths, and it's a fun read still, just for like the novelty of having the first Simpsons comic. It's an Australasian reprint, but whatever, it's still a piece of history. And the last question by Edwin is, are you interested in watching stuff that challenges your beliefs and makes you want to hear other perspectives from the other side? It could really be about anything: culture, politics, animation, games. I try to keep politics out of my channel as much as I possibly can, but for everything else, yeah, absolutely. I do always want people to be heard, even if they're people that I vehemently disagree with. That's how debate works. That's how, people are heard and how people get ideas. I feel like if you just lock yourself up in an echo chamber where you just watch videos that agree with you, you're probably never going to, change your mind about even the biggest things. And it is going to be harder for you to hear people who you disagree with, which I think is a healthy part of life, having good friends that you can disagree with on things. I think that's totally fine. I hope that not everyone who watches my videos feels like they're obligated to 100% agree with me, because I don't think that's a healthy way of thinking. I do encourage people to think for themselves. And as long as you're not a jerk about it, saying that I'm right, you're wrong, and then here's what I have to say, then you're probably going to be a little more convincing, because for the past 10 years or so, maybe a little less than 10 years, there have been so many video essays that just start with an I'm right, you're wrong sort of mood, and that always kills interest. That doesn't help discussion on anything, to feel like you've got the only correct opinion. I never feel like I'm the most informed on a topic. I feel like the most informed people are the creators of the things I review, which is why I have in my bio, if your opinions differ from mine, you're likely smarter than me. It is self-deprecating, but I think it does help in making me seem a bit more humble about being a moderately successful reviewer on this platform. So thank you so much for all the questions. Can't believe how long I've been recording. See you all in the 2025 Q&A. Goodbye for now, and thanks for all the questions again.